Hey there folks, welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Whitfield Report. I am your host, Sam Whitfield, here. So I usually do pre-recorded podcast episodes on Thursdays, but for today, I thought it would be best if I did this show on Wednesday. And this is my third attempt actually recording this podcast because GarageBand, for whatever reason, does not want to work properly. It'll record and whatnot, but it'll add echoes and all sorts of effects that I don't really want, in my podcast. So, it's bizarre, but we're, we've got things running, so I'm just using the standard voice memos app on my computer, so we're good. Anyway, two things I want to talk about today. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, obviously by now you've heard the news that Kamala Harris is Joe Biden's running mate for the 2020 Biden-Harris ticket, I guess. We can, make that official now, I guess. So I want to talk a little bit about that, kind of give my thoughts on that. And then I also want to respond to something that my friend Ray, who hosts Eye on the Empire, that podcast, I want to respond to some of his comments from his show on Monday about coronavirus, because he made some really good points and whatnot. But anyway, I want to begin with this Fox News article on Kamala Harris. So this was published yesterday, right after Harris was announced as Biden's running mate. So, headline from Fox News, Kamala Harris chosen as Biden's running mate. What to know? Sub-headline, Harris served 25 years as a prosecutor in California and 6 as the state's top cop. And let's get this into reader mode real quick. Alright. Who is Kamala Harris? California's Senator Kamala Harris has been announced as Joe Biden's vice presidential pick. Here's what you need to know about her. After much anticipation, Joe Biden announced Tuesday that his vice presidential pick would be Kamala Harris, the senator from California, and his former opponent in the presidential primary. Harris, a former prosecutor, whose most high-profile moment on the presidential campaign trail came during a summer debate where she dissected Biden on his past stances on busing students to desegregate schools, may have the take-no-prisoners attitude needed to square up against the Trump-Pence ticket. Here are 5 things to know about Biden's running mate and the potential first female vice president. Number 1, Harris would be the first black and first female vice president. The daughter of an Indian mother and a Jamaican father, Harris checks the box for those who pressured Biden to pick a black female running mate in light of racial injustice across the country. Harris's race played out in one of her most memorable debate moments. She challenged Joe Biden's opposition to federally mandated busing when he was in the Senate, telling him she benefited from the program to integrate schools. Quote, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools, and she was bused to school every day. That little girl was me, Harris said. Okay, number 2 on the list. Harris served as California's top cop. Harris served 25 years as a prosecutor in California. After spending her childhood in Oakland, California, Harris attended historically black college Howard University before attending law school at UC Hastings. After law school, Harris served 8 years in Alameda County District Attorney's Office where she prosecuted child sexual assault cases. She served as San Francisco's district attorney from 2004 to 2011 and California's attorney general from 2011 to 2017. So she went from being the San Francisco AG to AG for the whole state. Harris's record as top cop could backfire amid a renewed focus on police brutality. Biden himself has attacked Harris's record as a prosecutor. In a debate last August, Biden accused the California senator of keeping nonviolent prisoners behind bars during her tenure as California Attorney General because they were a source of cheap labor for the state. Quote, "What happened? Along came a federal judge and said enough is enough, and he freed 1,000 of these people," Biden said as he argued that Harris was forced by a judge to release the prisoners. In the same debate, Representative Tulsi Gabbard slammed Harris's record on marijuana violations. Quote, "She put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and laughed about it when asked if she had ever smoked marijuana," the congresswoman argued. The figure apparently comes from a Washington Free Beacon article from back in February. As Gabbard indicated, Harris has softened towards the issue since. Harris said in an interview earlier this year that she smoked marijuana as a college student, laughing at the memory. Which, in my opinion, folks, is kind of a moot point since, most college students, me included admittedly, have smoked marijuana, once or twice. Gabbard also charged that Harris, quote, "In the case of those who are on death row, innocent people, you blocked evidence from being revealed that would have freed them until you were forced to do so," end quote. The congressman from Hawaii was likely pointing to the murder case of Kevin Cooper, who was convicted in 1983 of a quadruple homicide. The death row inmate came close to execution in 2004 when Harris, as Attorney General, denied Cooper's request for newly advanced DNA testing. In February of this year, newly elected California Governor Gavin Newsom ordered new DNA testing. Number 3 on this list, hints were dropped that Harris could be the VP pick. Okay. After Harris dropped out of the race and endorsed Biden's campaign, Biden indicated that he wanted to have her as a heavy hand in his campaign. Quote, "I'm so lucky to have you be a part of this partnership going forward. Working together, we can make a great deal of progress. I'm coming for you, kid," Biden said. In April, Harris formed a joint fundraising committee with the DNC, meaning that the groups could raise money together with a maximum of $2,800 per contributor, going to pay off Harris's presidential campaign debts and $800,000 going to the Democratic Party. This peculiar arrangement is typically reserved for the party's presidential nominees and could indicate that Biden and the Democrat Party are seriously considering Harris as a viable VP contender. And at the very least, shows that the National Party looks favorably upon the California senator and wants her to play a major role in its 2020 strategy. Okay, number 4 on this list. As Biden pointed out, Harris touts her tough on-banks records. Quote, "Back when Kamala was Attorney General, she worked closely with Beau. I watched as they took on the big banks, lifted up the working people, and protected women and kids from abuse. I was proud then, and I'm proud now to have her as my partner in this campaign, Biden said in announcing his running mate. Harris often promotes her record on taking banks to task during the financial crisis, forcing big banks to make amends to customers hurt during the financial crisis. Quote, during the 2008 financial crisis, a group of attorneys general officials from Housing and Urban Development and Justice Departments and others sought to address revelations that the top banks had rushed through a flood of foreclosures as mortgage defaults skyrocketed. Harris pulled her state out of national negotiations, pursuing the monetary settlement from major banks, believing she could do better for her state. Harris later reached a $25 billion settlement from J.P. Morgan and other banks, which she said was a much higher number than was initially on the table, but some question her influence over the deal. Others question why the former California AG did not prosecute Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin for violating state foreclosure laws. Journalist Aaron Glantz wrote in a 2019 book that Harris allowed Mnuchin's One West Bank at the time to illegally foreclose on tens of thousands of families and then tried to bury a report with the evidence. Alright, so that is the end of the article here. So, very interesting take. Now, make no mistake, folks. So here's my take on Kamala Harris, in brief. A lot of Democrats seem to think that Kamala Harris is the energy that the Biden campaign needs. And in a sense, they're right, because, let's face it, Joe Biden is old. He's been in politics forever. He's uninteresting. Even the Democrats kind of have to admit that it's kind of looking like he has dementia and he doesn't really know where he is half the time. The gaffes are unavoidable. He's just a fairly unlikable guy, right? Even the Dems have to admit this. Kamala Harris is a black, woman. She's articulate, much like Barack Obama is, as Ben Shapiro pointed out last year. She has charisma and she has energy. So, in a way, Kamala Harris is to Joe Biden what Sarah Palin was to John McCain in 2008, right? If you remember back in 2008, and I certainly remember because 2008 was really the first election that I followed, closely as a student for an 8th grade civics class at the time. And, back then, John McCain was just not very interesting. He was kind of old and, fuddy-duddy seeming. And Sarah Palin was really the energy that the party, needed. So it was essentially, Hillary, or I would say, Sarah Palin was the big poll for the, McCain campaign in 2008. Now, of course, we all know that turned out with, Barack Obama winning his first of 2 terms, but still, there's no doubt that Sarah Palin at the time had a major influence on, the Republican campaign, and she wanted to be to be the voice of the Republican Party for a number of years, really, up until Trump came in 2015 and announced he was running for president. Palin was really kind of the de facto conservative, voice at the time. And, in all honesty, I kind of see Kamala Harris as kind of the same way right now for the Democrats. The Democrats don't really have anyone all that exciting right now. I would argue that Harris herself really is too establishment for some people, so that might be a turnoff. But, she's a lot better than Biden is on his own. I think the fact that she's a woman and that she's an African American certainly helps her out, with the party's identity politics. There's no denying that. She is very tough in debates, and so I think that will, objectively, that will stack up well against, Trump's, no-nonsense toughness. Even though Harris is in the VP seat, I think that will come into play too. It is interesting that, she is a prosecutor, because that seems to be the one area where Republicans are kind of thinking that, that's the big chink in her armor, is that she is a prosecutor. She's essentially a cop, which to a lot of the Black Lives Matter, type folks out there on the left, that could be a big no-no. And also the fact that she has been in law enforcement for, 25 years and, has been in politics for that long, too. More than that probably now. But, with that being said, she does have chinks in her armor, folks. There's no doubt about that. But the Republicans, seem to think that because she is an establishment politician and that because she has that, chink of being, a prosecutor in her armor, they think that will, I guess, somehow drive, the Democrats away. And I think a lot of people are, at least on the Republican side, are kind of underestimating her. She definitely has the qualities that Joe Biden doesn't, and I think the way people are looking at Kamala Harris on both sides of the aisle, whether you like her or hate her, the thing with Kamala Harris, objectively, is that we may be looking at the United President as the next, not only Vice President of the United States, but with the way things are going with Biden, we may be looking at the next President of the United States, right? And so there's huge anti-Trump sentiment right now in the Democrat Party. According to the Democrats, he's a white, cis male who's racist, and, he's a billionaire. He comes from a wealthy family. He's literally Hitler in some of these people's eyes. And Kamala Harris, well, she came from a poor black family of immigrants in California. She's had to work her ass off. She is a prosecutor, but she's black, so that helps. And plus, even if the Dems don't like her, there is that attitude of, well, she's better than Trump, right? The Dems are taking the never Trump approach, similarly to how conservatives, even if they didn't like Trump as our guy, right? A lot of us voted for him over Hillary because they saw Trump as the lesser of two evils, right? And I think a lot of Democrats, even if they don't like Kamala Harris, I think we're kind of in the same boat. They're going to see Kamala Harris as the lesser of two evils. So, my advice to, Republicans is do not sleep on Kamala Harris. Don't be doing a victory lap already, as I've seen some of my, fellow conservatives and, conservatarians doing on Twitter, because the election for Trump is not in the bag yet. We still have until November 4th. That might not seem like, a long way away, since, it's only a couple months. But in reality, that is still enough time for, for major shifts to happen. We still have coronavirus to deal with, which obviously that is not Trump's fault. But the media, the mainstream media, which is supporting, Biden and Harris, they might not have come out and said that, coronavirus is Trump's fault, but it has basically been implied. So there's a lot of anger against, Trump from the Dems in that respect. Trump is the incumbent, president, and like or not, that is always a hurdle to climb over. So this election is going to be very interesting no matter what. And with Harris in the mix, I would not discount, Biden and Harris quite yet. Republicans need to take this seriously if they want to win in November. Okay? So that's my take on Kamala Harris and that whole thing. As things progress in the election, I'm sure, we'll have more to talk about. But for now, those are just kind of my first thoughts on Kamala Harris. Now, shifting over to what, to COVID and, to my friend, Ray, who hosts Eye on the Empire. First off, kind of plugging Ray's podcast. And he's not paying me to do this or anything. This is just me supporting a podcast I really like. So Ray, and some of you guys have heard me mention him before, he posts Ion 2020. He and I connected through the Anchor Podcast group on Facebook. And I've been listening to his podcast probably since around this time last year, actually. So I'm not sure exactly when he started, but I've been pretty close to a regular listener of his podcast, and he's more, I wouldn't call him a strict libertarian, but he definitely identifies politically as more of a strict libertarian and less of a conservatarian like I do. But his podcast, Ion 2020, is his tag is a look at the election from a libertarian perspective, and really, because this year has been so weird, it's kind of become like a look at 2020 through the eyes of a libertarian perspective. And as I've mentioned before, what I like about Ray is, usually with most libertarian podcasts out there, and really with any, political podcast, whether it be a conservative podcast or a liberal podcast, they all kind of expect you to already be kind of indoctrinated and be familiar with, party, policy and party terms. But because of the way Ray approaches libertarianism, I almost call it libertarianism for dummies is how I would approach his podcast. I certainly understand libertarian principles more, but like I said, I'm more of a conservative, leaning libertarian. So I'm not really familiar with all of the minutia of what libertarianism is. So he breaks things down, and he breaks down libertarian arguments in a way that really the average everyday person can really understand, right? Because some of the libertarians are really, far out there, and they're so boggled down in their minutia, and this is a criticism of any politico, I guess, anyone on the aisle, but he really tries to explain, what libertarianism is from a great perspective, so I highly recommend that you check him out. But he recently, on his latest episode, and this is why I wanted to talk about this, he recently talked about how he came down with a cold this past weekend and was needing to get a COVID test because, he wanted to get tested to see if he had COVID, and thank goodness he didn't. But he described how arduous the process was of just even, trying to find a doctor that, could get the test and, take it within like a reasonable amount of time and whatnot, and, all this stuff, and, I'm not going to try and summarize his entire story, so I'll link, I'll link his episode, where he talks about that in the description of this podcast. But one thing that, he talks about a lot in this episode, and that he's talked about a lot before in this podcast regarding coronavirus, and something that I kind of want to touch in, is just how bureaucratic, right, this whole COVID thing has become, and how overblown it's become to a certain extent, and how the numbers really aren't, how the figures really don't mean what they appear to mean, right? And this is something that I've talked a lot about, regarding coronavirus this year too, on this podcast. Right? I'm kind of dealing with like a similar situation where I'm heading back to school. I'm in my senior year of college, and I'm going back. School starts on the 24th for me, so a little in just over 2 weeks for me, I'll be heading back. I'm taking online classes, so really I'll still be here at home, but I will be, I guess telecommuting to classes and, doing classes via Microsoft Teams or, WebEx, or I think we're using Microsoft Teams, but we could be using WebEx. Anyway, but they are going to have the campus open, and in order for me to even be on campus, if I need to, I'm going to have to get tested for, COVID every, 14 days, and in fact, they just sent out an announcement that, for any student who is planning to come back to campus, even if it's just like only to use the study, rooms or anything like that, or to use the cafeteria, we're going to have to get screened for, COVID. So, there's a long process with that, and even though the school is providing, that for us, there's going to be a lot of students, you have to schedule appointments, and then I guess, from what I've also read, at least my school, the University of South Florida, they can also basically summon students to get tested for COVID at random, right? So even if I never end up going to campus, once this semester physically, because I said that I would like the option to still go back to campus, they may call me and say, you have to come in for a random COVID test because your student ID popped up in this lotto or whatever, right? And to me, this seems really sketchy because the general consensus is, right, and even Fauci has talked about this, really people under 50 aren't at risk unless they have, some compromised, immune system. So, most college students really are not at risk, right? And even with me being in a wheelchair and being wheelchair bound, my disability really doesn't have anything, to do with my, respiratory system or anything like that. More my ambulatory system for sure. But I might be considered slightly more at risk for coronavirus than a lot of my, peers, a lot of people in their 20s. But I'm still not in a major risk category, right? And granted, I'm an older, college student. I'm mid-20s. Most college students are under 24. So they're not even in the coronavirus risk category. And neither are little kids. So it is weird to me that they're making us, basically, take coronavirus tests at random. Oh, and then the other thing I love, and I've heard this from a bunch of other students too, I guess every day, at the start of every school day, Monday through Friday, whether you plan to come to campus or not that day, you're going to have to fill like a quick daily assessment survey, like indicating like how you feel and what you're, if you've been sick or anything like that, or if you've been under stress or anything like that. And I guess based on these, like daily quick survey results, that will indicate whether or not you can come on to campus for that day. And you'll either get like an approval check mark in the system, or you'll get denied. And, I'm not really sure. They haven't really explained what happens if you get denied. I guess you can't come on to campus, or, you might get contacted. Which will be very interesting because here's the thing. College can be pretty stressful, like even if you're on top of your classes and whatnot. It's stressful anyway for most students. I know certainly that's the case for me. So, during finals and whatnot, and during like, midterms, there's going to be a lot of students who get stressed out. So, because is that going to be a COVID trigger? Right? And if they make us stay in isolation, for 14 days, right? Presumably, if, that were to occur for a student, what happens then? Like, how is your workload going to be affected? Will students, get like, exemptions and time off to, for personal healthcare reasons? How does that all work out? It just seems like a major overreach to me that the school is, doing this. And then I guess, if you don't fill out the survey or whatnot, like if you just forget or something like that, which could always happen depending on, maybe you have like an early morning class and online, or, maybe you have a busy day and you just, you forget to fill out that survey. If, for whatever reason you forget to fill out that survey, there will be consequences. And what are those consequences? Well, we don't know. But it seems pretty ominous to me that they're saying that there are severe consequences for quote-unquote violating, or not following the COVID rules for coming back to campus. Will a student get suspended and, or expelled? Probably not, but I don't like the idea that you could get suspended, for failing to abide by COVID rules for college campuses. There's just a lot of unknowns still with COVID, and the big fear of a lot of conservatives and a lot of libertarians, not just from the federal government, but from also state and local, and these institutions like universities and whatnot, is that they can basically take away our rights and our civil liberties and our way of life, and disrupt our living based off of this COVID fear. I mean, they already have to a certain extent with shutting down everything in March, and we've been on I wouldn't really say we're really on official lockdown, but we still are in a sense on lockdown nationwide and internationally, and I guess Trump is doing all right with COVID, considering, to be honest, I don't think he's doing an amazing job. I think the fact that he's doing executive orders out the wazoo instead of, trying to get Congress in on things is really bad. Of course, I don't think Congress is doing all that well either on this, so it's a catch-22. But, really what irritates me is that, COVID is being used as a political football. I worried that this was going to be the case, back when this whole lockdown started in March, and lo and behold, I was right. And I think that was a legit fear of a lot of people, and now we're starting to, see that come into, effect. So eventually, if things don't turn around, if we don't end the lockdown soon, and I'm not trying to sound like an Alex Jones conspiracy theory guy, but I think you're going to see massive, civil disobedience nationwide if this thing doesn't at least start to turn around during, during the holidays. And I'm also curious to see exactly how, COVID will be used as political football during the presidential election and during the debates more specifically, because it's going to be used that way. You just know that's the case. How specifically it's going to be used, well, I can only theorize at that point, that probably, Biden and Harris will somehow, make a remark to make it seem like Trump, either caused coronavirus or didn't do enough to prevent it, quote unquote, or anything like that. And, it'll just be a mess. So, I don't know really what to think on this whole thing, other than that, to my fellow college students who are kind of disgruntled about, having to, go back to school during this time, I hear you loud and clear. I'm with you. I feel your pain. I'm in the same boat with many of you. And, just keep your head down and, keep trucking forward if you are going back to school. I do know a bunch of college students who, who aren't going back to school. They've decided, what, I'm going to wait until January and see if things are open by then. Me, I'm close enough to graduating. I still have a couple more semesters left, but I'm close enough to graduating to where I'm kind of well, I just need to push forward and, get things moving. So, hopefully this semester will go well for me. I'm planning on making, things happen to the best of my ability on that front. And, to my fellow students who are in the same boat, good luck to you. And to the rest of everyone else who is in the working place and maybe going back to work, maybe not. I continue to, wish you all good success, too, with dealing with this thing. We are all in this together. We're all sharing the same frustrations, and I just urge you to stand strong. Alright, folks, so that'll do it for today's podcast. Like I said, much shorter than the Saturday live stream, but, we got a good 40 minutes in, roughly. So I appreciate you guys tuning in to the podcast, and I will be back for the Saturday live stream show, 10 p.m. Eastern on youtube.com/The Whitfield Report, and also dlivetv.com/The Whitfield Report. Also on audio podcast on Sundays. And folks, I'll see you then. And until then, God bless, God save this great nation, God, freedom, legacy, in that order. And I will see you on the next episode of the Whitfield Report.